Hello, good morning, and welcome to Paint with Mesma, my weekly, well, my weekly session. I don't want to call it anything else, with people who are interested in the arts, especially the visual and performing arts. I apologize about the lighting today in here is rather poor, but I hope that you can listen to me rather than watch me, which is the idea. I'm not going to be painting today because there's some days when I want to work privately, so I don't make it public, you know. So today is one of those days when I would rather be alone in my studio and work on some canvases. But I want to talk to you today about some of the questions that I always receive from people, and they are often ubiquitous. And what I mean is people from all walks of life, interest, people who are what we call uninitiated, although I'm not a very big fan of that word, but I think you catch my drift when I say that, is that people who don't usually go and interact with works of art on a regular basis, or who for whom art is an isolated experience. I often hear that we don't understand it. We don't we don't get it. We don't get why we are looking at this particular work of art. What is so special about it? Of course, if it's visually arresting, if it's visually beautiful, if it is attractive to look at in the conventional sense, then it's easier for them to appreciate it and to then um, relish it in their own time and with their own what they call understanding. So they understand that in a way that they cannot explain, but they would rather look at something like that than look at something where they're not sure what they're looking at. And this is an interesting problem. Well, problem not in the conventional sense, but problem in the sense that it is an interesting challenge to think about as to why that is. Because as an artist, I'm always observing others, and I'm often surprised by by the reactions or the thoughts, because they're usually not my thoughts. So I'm baffled by how people respond to art, and I'm often wondering about why is it that they feel that way. Uh, I was at the Metropolitan Museum last week with my mother, and while we were walking through the galleries, she had some very surprising, insightful comments to make about a lot of the works that were hanging in the galleries. But when we came to uh, even even impressionism or post-impressionism, she was a little confused. She wasn't quite sure why were they here? Why were they in the museum? Because in her eyes, they were quite ordinary works that didn't warrant a special treatment. And then I was looking around, and then we have this other contemporary problem of scanning the world through our phones. Uh, I know a lot has been said about this ad nauseum, that we are addicted to technology, we are addicted to our devices, and so forth. And all of that is true. Yes, we have an affliction in the contemporary society where technology has taken over, or rather, digital technology has taken over most of our thinking and our processing of mostly information. It is mostly information that we are um, dealing with, and then one piece of information comes, and then another piece of information comes, and what we do with it is up to the individual. So then there was this other problem that I noticed, that people were looking at the paintings or sculptures in the museum with their through their phones. So they were getting a second-hand experience. So the image was being filtered through the screen of their phone, and they were just scanning it. What I mean by scanning is that it was a quick um, view through the window of the phone, and then they would move on to the next one that was in the neighborhood of that work, and then they would scan that quickly, take a picture, and then maybe take a picture of the label, and then move on to the next one. And this kept happening with multiple people. And that also made me wonder, well, how much of it are we really looking at? Are we really looking at it? Because what is looking? Uh, I love the quote by the poet Paul Valéry, who said, and I quote him, that looking is forgetting the name of that what one sees, unquote. I think that's the, I might have messed up a few words there, but again, what he's saying is that to look at something is to forget the name of what one is looking at. Now, that might sound very, uh, objectionable if one is obsessed with trying to understand what one is looking at. So, if one wants to look at something, then one wants to know, am I looking at a river? Am I looking at a ship? Am I looking at a city, the buildings, the trees? What is it I'm looking at? Yeah. And if I don't know, if I don't have a name for it, if I don't know what it is, then it is quite baffling. And there are very few things in the world, I think, today that we don't know. Uh, well, there are many things that we don't know about, but among the common things in everyday life of everyday living, usually we know what we're looking at. So when we are confronted by something that we don't know what we're looking at, our it challenges us. It challenges us in a way that not knowing, the idea of not knowing becomes threatening to us. Because if we don't know, then either we would be considered not intelligent enough, not smart enough, or I don't know, it could even go back to some of the primal fears. I have not unpacked this aspect, but perhaps it is the fear of not belonging to the tribe. And once one is not in the tribe, then one faces the fear of being ostracized from the tribe. And therefore, once one is ostracized, then one is vulnerable to being killed by a predator. So this could go back to a survival anxiety, anxiety of death, anxiety of one's perishing. I'm just thinking this out aloud with you. I'm not sure if that is exactly what it is, but it could be that. And this anxiety of knowing everything, and if not known, then one is out of the tribe. This could be behind the rejection of artworks that are not immediately understood by the intellect. So we have this problem. Now, I was reading a couple of things by artists who have talked about this in their own way, although they were not trying to make a statement, but artists often speak from a place of experience. We're not that interested in analyzing things. We're not that interested in theorizing. We speak from experience. If something is not in my experience, I usually don't like to talk about it, because what do I know? Yeah. But I learn from from other artists, and therefore I often look at and read what they have said. And here's one quote from Eric Fischl, who says, I quote, "The difference between painting and other forms of creativity like writing or filmmaking is that painting is a pre-verbal experience." Again, I'll read it again. "The difference between painting and other forms of creativity like writing or filmmaking is that painting is a pre-verbal experience." Now, one could read all kinds of things into this quote. But what I like about it is that he's calling a painting a pre-verbal experience, which means that it comes before words, before the description of anything. Uh, you know, when we look at the world, say we're looking at a flower. Let's just take the example of a rose, for example. And we're looking at a rose, and we tell a child that, that's a rose. The child asks you, what is that? Mommy, daddy, or whoever, what is that? And for the first time, you tell the child, it's a rose, my dear. But is it? Is it a rose? How do we know it is a rose? We call it a rose. We've given it the name, the verbal form of that creature. I'm calling the flower a creature, by the way. That creature, the verbal form of that is rose. The language that describes it is rose. But is it a rose, or is it called a rose? There are two things here, and they are quite different if you think about it. I think that we have given it the name rose so we can distinguish it among the universe of flowers in our world, so that it helps us recognize it. And of course, scientists can say, oh yeah, because it has this genetic makeup, and if you look under a microscope, this is what you'll find, and that you'll find. Again, that is a description of what you see. We are giving it a language, linguistic classification, linguistic description, linguistic analysis to help us recognize it the next time we see it. But does that mean that we know what it is? I think that art is what helps us drop that obsession with this preoccupation with describing things in language, because it enters a different kind of an expressive realm. So we have this all pervading idea that unless I can name it, unless I can put a verbal description on it, it doesn't mean anything, or that it doesn't have its own, there's no intrinsic value in it. And if I don't understand it, then it is even more threatening, because then I don't know what I'm looking at. So what art is about is not about understanding what a painting is. I'm often asked by people, what does this painting mean? What is it about? And if I tell them, I don't know what it's about, why don't you tell me what's it about? Or even better, if you tell me that, Mesma, I have no words, that is the ultimate compliment. That makes me very happy. When people tell me, I don't know what it is, I have no words, but I can't stop looking at it. That means it is speaking to you in a different language, a language that you perhaps think you don't know, but there is a source within you that recognizes it. And it is a source that is untapped, untapped by the societal conditioning, untapped by the educational system in which we grow up, which tries to mold us into this or that, untapped by the conventions that describe or prescribe a particular way of living, and then we conform to that, and then we just spend our lives like that. And in the noise of that conformity, we lose our true selves. So art becomes a way of pulling us back to the source, I think. It becomes a way to bring us to a place where words don't matter. In fact, they don't really exist. And I'm talking about visual experiences. I'm not talking about the art of writing, for example. There you have to use words. But even then, the words are like that. They're like paint, that like color, you know. They are mediums to create a visual. For example, in a novel, if you're reading a novel, we create our own visuals through through the language, and it is the visuals that we relish. It is not just the words that we relish. It is what kind of imagination those words conjure up for us. That imagination is the powerful um, agent. And sometimes it is an agent of transformation. One can be transformed, therefore, art can be transformative. And it has happened to many people. They have experienced something that they didn't know what it was, and suddenly it hit them so strongly that their lives were changed. But for that, in order for that to happen, we have to be very open. We have to really open our hearts and not just our minds to what we are looking at. But if we want to put a label on it, if we want to constantly describe in words what we are looking at, then I think we lose the whole point of looking at art. There's another quote that I um, saw that I love. Actually, this is by Georges Braque, and he says, I quote, "In art, only one thing matters, that which cannot be explained." I think that's a rather dramatic way of saying what I have been talking about. He says that in art, only one thing matters, that which cannot be explained. And he's speaking about the same thing that I was just talking about, is if you have to use words, if you have to use words to explain what you have done, then why do it in the first place? Then I would just use words. I would use, prose. I would write an essay about it. I would write an article about it. And I could reach many more people, perhaps, because words are very powerful means of communication. We communicate through words on an everyday basis. I'm talking to you right now with words. I'm not just saying, here, look at this painting, and I'll stop talking. I'll do that occasionally, but not during these sessions, because I got the feedback from people that, we want to hear you talk. We want to know what we are looking at. So again, we are back to that same desire to understand conventionally to understand logically what one is looking at. And I don't think that conventional logic will lead you to transcendent, to the experience of the transcendental. For that, you have to drop that. For that to happen, uh, and what I mean by transcendental is something that renders you speechless, that renders you forget that you are looking at it. The distinction between the work of art and you is gone. It doesn't exist. That moment, that absolutely blissful moment is what I'm talking about. So, um, so there. I think that for that to happen, words are not necessary. Um, of course, you might disagree with me, and I would love to know if you do and why. So please leave a comment in the comment box. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so. I'm hoping to grow the number of my subscribers. So I request you, if you have not subscribed yet, please do so whenever. And I think there's something called bell icon and whatnot. I think you know the drill. I don't have to repeat it. It's all over YouTube. So you know that drill. I don't remember it, but I think you might. So please perform the drill and just do me a favor. Thank you. All right. So there's one more quote that I wanted to read. Oh yeah, this one is by Charles Demuth. And he says, I quote, paintings must be looked at and looked at and looked at. No writing, no talking, no singing, no dancing will explain. So again, the same point. I don't want to belabor it. I think you get it by now. But here he is strictly talking about painting. I'm also a dancer, and I know the power of dance. I know what it can do. I know how it can reach you. It can grab you with the throat and shake you up, or reach inside you and eviscerate. And I've seen dance like that too. So again, even in dance, you don't need words. You don't need to know what is this dance about. When you look at say well, let's just say Rudolf Nureyev, okay, in L'après-midi d'enfant, that beautiful composition by Debussy, and I think I hope I'm pronouncing all this correctly. Pardon me if I'm not. But the Diaghilev production, if you haven't seen it, look it up. It is a sublime, sublime work of art. When Nureyev dances Nijinsky's faun, you don't see Nureyev. You see a faun. I see a faun. I see a human transformation. I see the pinnacle of what a human body can achieve, that it can transform its own form and endow or not endow or don another being so convincingly that you forget that you are watching a performance, because you're completely absorbed in it, and you forget that you're sitting in a room watching something, or you're sitting in the theater. Well, in this case, it's on YouTube. But the point I'm trying to make is that one does not need to explain to me the story and the meaning and the philosophy and the whole jargon of words for me to appreciate it, because I can just drop all those labels and let that experience of a powerful, powerful visual by a great artist transform me, transport me. And that is true transcendence. Because what are we transcending? We are transcending the limitations of our daily lives, the humdrum, especially of modern living, where we wake up and we go through the same cycle by rote, uh, under the pressure of contemporary demands that are put on us. Can anything help us transcend that? And I say yes. I say it is great art that will help us transcend it. So that's the third quote I wanted to read you. And the final quote of the day is, again, I think I've already said this, is by Francis Bacon, who said, if you can talk about it, why paint it? So I think I've made that point already. So that is it for today. Paint with Mesma is a weekly session where I talk to you about my process. Sometimes I paint quietly and you watch me paint. Sometimes I have thoughts about art and matters pertaining to that, and I share them with you. Or sometimes we just take questions from people and I try to answer them. So it's a mixed bag. I hope that it offers you what you seek through these channels, and that it helps people to uh, um, look at art in new ways. Because I'm not trying to preach, I'm not trying to show off in any way. My intention is to help dispel some of the misconceptions about art, artists, and why do we do what we do. Because I don't think that our educational system does anything to serve art or artists. In fact, it's quite discouraging. People talk about follow your passion, but um, I don't think that they really mean it. Because if they did, they would say such things with caution. Because being a professional artist is not just about following your passion. There's a whole lot more to it than that. And sometime maybe I will do a session on that. But for today, I just want to leave you with this, maybe a question, that when I go to the museum or when I look at art, can I drop the desire, my personal desire, to try to understand what I'm looking at? And can I just take it in? And can I spend time looking at it with perhaps the discomfort of not knowing what is it that I'm looking at? So with that, I bid you farewell for this weekend, and I will see you next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Until then, thank you, goodbye, have a lovely weekend, keep creating and smiling. Bye-bye.